Hey guys, Tracie Daily here. Last chapter was so hard to go over because that was back when I was 15, 16 then. I'm 40 now. 4-0, the big 4-0. You know, physically I might have changed, but oh well, let's be honest, hell, mentally I've changed as well, a hell of a lot. And my point is, there is a world of difference between who I am today and who I was back then. It is so hard to go over. Knowing what I know now, I would never have accepted a lot of the situations I was in then. But because I was, again, the blame game if you like, because I was a child, I did, you know. It wasn't all the fault of social services, it wasn't all the fault of my father, or all the fault of my uncles, or all the fault of the environment. Part of the big chunk of it was me. I didn't know how to digest or resolve or discuss. A lot of the time found me stuttering. I was mute for God knows how long. That goes through that in Tracie's story. So speaking about my emotions was extraordinarily difficult. Today I am much better. In fact, I'm probably one of the most open guys I know. I don't think there's a guy I know that speaks as openly as I do about anything. But I also find that there's probably a lot of people that have trust issues with me in case they end up being inside the book as well. Respect to them for that, because that takes some nuts. But then again, you know what? I think I'm my mate Dan. I don't know him that well, but I know him well enough that he's been around my house a few times. And he's probably the most dirt straight guy I know that's left today. And yeah, I've got a lot of trust there. I won't tell him that, obviously. He might listen to this cast. But otherwise it takes a lot to deal with stuff like that and to notice the differences between. So the last one was really hard, and this one's not much better, but it starts getting easier for a little bit here before I have a nervous breakdown later on, which I don't know what happens, but whatever, we'll get into that. It's absolutely ridiculous, and thankfully my life today is so far unattached, distanced from the book content. It is unbelievable. If you knew me today, what I do and how I do it, and how calm and relaxed and normal my life is today, you'd be amazed at the differences between the book content. And I've had several comments like, I don't believe it, there's no way, this and then. Yeah, ask me a question, I'll answer it. I don't need the book to answer it. I can recite it from memory. There's a reason I can recite it from memory. It's not just because I've got a great memory. It's because I actually lived it and it actually happened. So it's not EastEnders or Coronation Street or any other drama products you might have watched. It's actually a true story. Which, I really want this as a film. I really want this as a film. That it's immortalised forever then. I always loved Good Will Hunting. So shout me out or give me a comment if anyone's got that as the biggest fan favourite. Not that I fancied myself as a Matt Damon, I'm a bit skinny, but that film was done absolutely flawlessly when it came to the relationship between Matt Damon and Robin Williams. It was really well done from somebody who's been in very similar therapy sessions. It was, and who's finding himself doodling on my book now as I'm talking to you, and I'm doing boxes and crisscrosses, and because of the amount of therapy that I've done, I know exactly what all these things mean. They're like, oh look, you're stuck and you're trapped, and you know, I'm not, I'm comfortable. Oh, whatever. We're going to do chapter 15 today. And you'll know if you're married with children, or married without children, or with children and not married, that you get very little time. So when you do, you either chill out and play Minecraft and do whatever it is you happen to do. Me, I'm a Minecraft go-to. I'm RuneScape. You'll find me on RuneScape. I'm not going to give you my name, but you know, just run around shouting Tracie Daily Books hashtag on RuneScape, and A, that will really benefit me, so I'm chuffed, and B, you might actually find me. That'll be cool. It'll be very funny. Yeah, I'm in a weird mood. I'm past the point of caring right now. I've done a lot of chapters today, and it's been a little bit rough, if I'm honest. But I also know how to sort of flip back to reality. And the second my girls come up that path, they're awesome. They really are. my oldest is going for 11 plus. She's doing her 11 plus like extra tuition right now, and she's just got she's just passed her mock exam. I don't want to say exam. Exam's not the right word. Mock test for her next belt in karate. She's doing really, really well in that. Really well. She's had 2 different karate tutors, senseis if you like, and a taekwondo guy who's a bit weird, but the actual lessons weren't bad. I used to train with her, so dead proud. And my youngest is just awesome, and is getting like star of the week, star of the day, and all that stuff now. She's also writing our jumper, which tells me she's a little bit more like me than we're probably letting on. She's writing everywhere, but thankfully she's not put anything on the walls yet. So I know the second they get home, I'm going to flip straight back into dad mode. I'll be like, "You alright, girls? What you been up to? How's Nanny?" Blah 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 blah. But yeah, right now it's been long going back over this past stuff. And to give you an idea of how long, there's 40 chapters in Checkmate, and we're on chapter 15. Thankfully, I think chapter 15 is only 2 or 3 pages. I don't know why. There will be somebody out there who does self-publishing that tells you there is a strict length and a strict number that you should have per chapter and per book and per novel and per novelette and per autobiography and per memoir and blah 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 blah. You know what? You do you, because A, nobody cares, and B, if it's good content, people are going to listen to it, and if it's not, who cares if you're happy? Just do it. Do what makes you happy. This makes me happy. It genuinely does, because once it's all out there and complete, I'm like, I did that, go back and have a look. And I do get people randomly approaching me. It's really weird, but it's also really, really positive at the same time. So okay, let's hit chapter 15. I've just come off 3 days being blanked from my memory as I fell asleep on a bathroom floor, and I woke up in one of my ex-partner's beds, and my uncle was at the end of my bed, and it seemed like 10 seconds had passed, but I'd actually lost 3 days, not 3.5 days. It's the strangest feeling if you've never had it. Actually, you know what I liken it to, in a way? You ever had an operation? I've had several on my teeth. Again, thanks to being in care and them, you know, my parents really fucking up my hygiene, but that's another story. I've got good teeth now, by the way, so don't imagine me all browned up and falling out. Actually, I have good teeth, sparkling. Again, no Matt Damon, but good teeth. But what I liken it to is when they give you an injection for an operation and then bang, you're out, and then boom, you wake up again. You're like, no time has gone past, but you've actually been out for like, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours. It's exactly like that. It was really weird. And here we go, chapter 15. Another difficult one, I'm afraid. I soon realised whenever I started feeling things from the past, my body started to shut down. This was probably enough in itself, however made much worse by the fact that there were reminders everywhere. And initially I couldn't pinpoint which part of the past would cause me to shut down. I would be with it 1 minute, and then feel myself going dark and withdrawing, and then bang, I'd be out. Thankfully, I didn't have any major repercussions. I didn't lose days after those first few, only hours. Courtney was busy at the front door trying to explain to a debt collector why we didn't have any money. It was news to me. I didn't even realise we had a debt. It wasn't much. I spoke to the guy and he agreed he'd pick up money weekly and it would be resolved. As soon as the debt was paid off, Courtney would take out another loan with the same company on the same day. She tried to explain it to me as though having the extra money was a good thing. After a big argument, it was time to introduce rule number 2. No loans. Ever. She didn't like it, but she stuck to it. She liked it even less when I asked her to cancel her puzzle book subscriptions. And the chat line. I couldn't face social services at all and told Mick Sharp that he could check on me, but not to talk to me about Jonathan or Jodie. I wasn't up to it. A reporter came to chat to me about the article to be produced. He even managed to I can't do that stuttering. It's been 30 years, and would you believe? I don't actually stutter in my day-to-day life, but because I've been over this so much today and it's really hard material, I've started stuttering again. Right, let's do this. I even managed to talk her up on her offer. I'd get £250 for the story, and another £250 if I let them write that I was having a relationship with Courtney. Why did they care that I was having a relationship with an older woman? I didn't know. but I did know that £500 with no questions asked would really come in handy. Phil turned up on my doorstep a few days later. I'd liked Phil as a kid, however it was strange, not only because Phil never asked me to go out with him before, but because he was almost begging me to go. I didn't want trouble on my doorstep. It appeared as though he would start shouting and acting like an idiot if I didn't. So of course I went. I felt a set-up coming on, but I couldn't figure out how. Something wasn't right, and Phil was immediately on edge as we walked side by side to the pub near Macclesfield Bowling Alley. Phil chugged one thick ale after another whilst telling me stories about how hard he is and his so-called fights that he'd been in. He was so full of shit. I sipped my drink. Whatever was wrong, it was brewing, and I needed to be sober to react to it. The door burst open and Clive stood in the doorway like he would just push the sides in and the whole building would collapse. "You, outside," he said, pointing to me. A couple of punters shrank into their seats. "This isn't good," Phil said, totally failing at covering himself. "What's up?" I asked, walking out the front door just behind Clive. There was no point in prolonging it. Besides, whatever was going to happen whether I sat there or not. "What's up?" he screamed, leaning forward so he was half an inch from my face. "What's fucking up?" My bike was with him, and he was pacing towards it and back to me. I'd sidestepped to the left and inadvertently put myself between a wall and a cast iron fence with spikes on the top. Not the smartest thing I'd ever done, and I couldn't move to my right because Phil was there, nor forwards because Clive was there. I managed to distract myself enough, even though I knew Clive would turn violent if he decided, by noticing that my bike had actually been repaired. He came forward with his head down, as though just walking towards me to pace backward again, but instead of turning and walking backwards, he simply lifted his arm and pushed me backward into the wall. "Hey, what's going on?" I said, pushing his arm away. He'd hit me before I'd even seen it coming. My head flipped, I turned against the railing with the impact. Spikes! Big metal black spikes right next to my face. This was not good. My mind yelled, "Run!" I was physically shaking, and Clive was still pacing like a lion waiting to take down his prey. Images flashed through my head of Wenzel taking the beating with the ironing board. "No," I said audibly to myself. Turned away from the railing. "What's wrong?" I asked Clive calmly. He came at me again. I stood no chance, and I wasn't going to try. But I wasn't going to be Wenzel either. I wasn't running. He slapped me hard, and it hurt like a punch. "Newspapers? Fucking newspapers? Really?" he stormed. I hadn't moved, nor let it be seen that the slap hurt. "Oh, it's that? Yeah, what's up?" I asked, totally not realising I should have ran it by Clive first. My stutter. Okay, here we go. I hadn't moved, nor let it be seen that the slap had hurt. "Oh, it's that? Yeah, what's up?" I asked, totally not realising I should have ran it by Clive first. "Bernie in the paper, disgracing her name? Don't you get it?" he said, his face next to mine. "Obviously not. Think of how it will hurt Wenzel," I said, knowing he had the keys and he'd done nothing. He turned around and kicked my bike. "My bike?" I said, getting a little bit of confidence back. "You should have told me. At least fucking warned me," he said, lifting his arm slowly, this time as though considering hitting me. I just looked at him. No attempt to run or move. Phil was silent and kept stepping backwards. He was worried. He'd expected me to cover, to curl up, to cower like Wenzel. Then Phil could put the boot in, and he'd be a hero, so they could both call me as bad as Wenzel. Fuck that, I'm not my dad. "Yeah, I should. I didn't think of that, you're right. Now, my bike?" I said as he still had his arm in mid-air and couldn't think of anything sensible to say. Clive laughed. He actually stopped and just laughed, a big full-on belly laugh. "You may look like him, but you're not him. I really want to smack you right now. But you're not him," he said. "That's my bike," I asked, pretending I'd ignored the comment. I didn't care what he thought of Wenzel, and if he couldn't say I wasn't him because of looks, I didn't care about that either. I knew if I thought too much about anything to do with Wenzel, I'd pass out again, and right now I really couldn't do that. "He cowered like a pussy that night, you know that," he said, referring to the night he'd given Wenzel a kicking and not realising I'd seen it. "I know, I was there. I'm not my dad," I replied. "Got it from Courtney's to come find you. Take it," he said, gesturing towards the bike. You could have asked me, I said, without being cocky. We both knew I'd not have said no. Fair one, come on, he said, heading towards Morrill Road. No more talk of papers though, eh? He said. I could feel Phil calming down as he walked behind us. I'll do it, but no pictures of Bernie, and I'll show you before it goes out, I replied without looking up. Phil seemed a lot less comfortable all of a sudden as I listened to his footsteps and waited for him or Clive to start swinging. Okay, lad, okay, Clive said, took off on my bike to replace it from where he took it. Phil fell in step beside me, but said nothing for several paces. I didn't know, honest I didn't, he said. I knew Clive was the muscle, Phil. I had you down as the brains. I guess I was wrong there though, I said, not bothering to look at him. I didn't know, you scared me there though, he said. Why? I asked. Nobody stands up to Clive, said Phil. His voice was faltering slightly. I didn't, I replied, this time turning to look at him as we walked. We made eye contact. Any trust I thought I had in Clive or Phil was gone. Clive didn't cause me any problems and was always polite after that, but word gets around fast. When everyone knew I'd been to the papers, I got the name of a grass. Even though Wenzel was the killer, and I'd not technically grassed on anyone, my rumour still gets around. Kids who would usually be playing football further down the street started throwing mud and stones at the house. The washing line was cut twice before we got an indoor airer, and because they were kids, I couldn't do a damn thing about it. Courtney, the kids and I were at the park. By now, Aaron, Courtney's eldest boy, was also living with us. He was a good lad, quiet, well-built and strong for his age. We were having a picnic on the grass with a blanket, minding our own business, when I saw Fawn's eyes flash. I turned around quickly to see a group of lads heading our way, 6, maybe 7 of them, varying ages. The oldest, I'd later find out, was called Peter, and he was 19. You're not from round here, are you? The tallest lad asked as he approached. Wait here, I said to the kids as I walked over. Actually, I was born round here, probably got more right to be here than you have, so if you don't want anything, I suggest you fuck off, I answered. I figured I'd get in there first, and either they'll disappear or, well, whatever. Oh, big words, one said. Just wanted to know if it was true, the tall guy asked. What? I asked. Mummy got herself killed, did she? Ran to the papers, I heard, he taunted. I took one step back and threw myself forward just as Peter pulled this guy to one side. Don't, he said to his mate. Clive's his uncle, he added. What just happened, I thought, as I stood dumbfounded, literally within the group of people I was trying to avoid. You are a Matt lad, then? He asked, looking over Pete's shoulder. Clive's sister was my brother, you know, the one you just took the piss out of, I replied. Now, mate, Clive doesn't need to know about this, does he, eh? Give him a whack, and it's done, or just leave it, eh? Pete said, all Macclesfield-like. He was smart, and I liked him. Hey, Courtney, he said, waving to the kids. Nice touch, I thought. Now it's done, I said, walking away. I heard him give his mate a balking as I left. We're leaving, I told Courtney as I reached the picnic blanket. What, she asked? Well, I'm leaving. If you want me, you and the kids can come too. Otherwise, I'm leaving Mac. I'm not fucking porn. I'm nobody's chess piece, and if I live here, I'll be forever looking over my shoulder. Besides, I can't be this close to Jonathan and Jodie and not see them. It was the first time I'd been able to speak their names without my body shutting down. That was progress. Chapter 16. It wasn't long, and property became available in Bury, Manchester. The road was Goldfinch Drive, and it sounded perfect. A Scottish fellow we knew called Craig said he would happily take Courtney and her stuff up to the house for 60 quid. I gave him 30 and told him I'd give him the other 30 when he arrived on site. He wasn't happy and wanted the payment up front. I got it and gave it to his missus. I travelled up there a couple of days before they were due to arrive. It needed decorating and carpeting, but otherwise it was a nice place. I had a big garden at the rear and the area seemed quiet enough. I got most of the unpacking done, which I'd managed to take with me via standard removal company. I don't know if it was because I didn't have the electric on for 2 nights, or if it was just being alone for the first time in a while, but something didn't feel right. I slept on the sofa and got the feeling I was being watched the entire time. Unfortunately, the feeling didn't disappear when I wasn't trying to sleep. I'd found one of my lock knives during unpacking and decided to keep it on me. It looked like a beautiful summer's day outside, yet it was freezing indoors. I chucked an extra sheet on the sofa for later and headed out. It was lovely and warm. I envisioned red and white roses in the front garden. Yeah, I could get used to this. It'd be okay, yeah. 2 women were walking down the footpath towards me. "Excuse me, nearest call box?" I asked, making it obvious I was completely new to the area. "Oh, go and see Andy, he lives there. He'll let you use his phone," she said, pointing next door but one to my house. "Thanks," I said, slightly more cautious than I was before. They're just being friendly, I told myself. I knocked on this fella's door and explained about the 2 girls. I could smell weed coming from the living room. "Phone," Andy said, pointing to it on top of the television beside a set of brass scales. 2 lads were chonging away on the sofa. Great, I thought, not wanting to owe this guy anything. I knew Mac rules. If he did owe me a favour today, I'd owe him a favour tomorrow. "It's okay, mate, just point me towards the nearest call box, yeah?" I asked. "Use that," he replied, nodding at the phone. I didn't argue. I bunged £1 on the side once I'd done. Alan was busy. It would be 2 days before he could bring her, and he wanted more money. I told Courtney to get here and I'd pay him. I had no intention of paying him. I'd unpack him, drop him if I had to. Should have said Craig was busy. Somebody's edit's gone up the wall. Firstly, that's part of the problem here. I'm not in Checkmate right now. You can close the book in front of me. Yay! Making a point. It's extraordinarily difficult to edit your own work. Secondly, I've changed the names in the book twice. The first time, I felt they were too similar to the original names. I didn't want a comeback. The second time, to change them completely. And so in this instance, I'd mixed the names up. The other reason this happened is because what's coming up, to this day I can't explain. There's 3 points in the book I really can't explain. One of them is I can only describe it today as a mental problem. When I was hallucinating. Oh my god. To think of me today and to think of me then. I was hallucinating on and off for weeks when I was with Courtney. A few chapters on. And in the next chapter I am potentially hallucinating again. And then thankfully, after these episodes they vanished. Now I say hallucinating. The events that I recall are exactly as they happened at the time. So you make up your own mind of whether I had a mental condition, whether they were real, whether they were spiritual, biblical, or whatever terminology you want to throw into the mix. You tell me. Were they paranormal, peri-paranormal, abnormal, or whatever? Were they anomalies? Were they picking up on other things via extrasensory perception? Was it clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience? Was it telepathy, astral travel? Was it picking up things from your subconscious? Was it bad dreams? Was it ghost hypnosis? Any other number of things you want to pick up on. Analyse it and dissect it in any way you choose. Today, I look at it that I had a mental problem at that point and now it's hallucinating. And I look at it that way through 3 stages within Checkmate. And I've not had those issues, thoughts, problems or visions in at least 17 years. So in a long time, not had anything like that, thankfully. At the same time, I will not deny at that point I believed in those accounts 110%. So what you will listen to or what you will read is 100% factual for the time. Which is why one day you will ask me about my faith and I'll tell you it's extraordinarily strong, or another day you'll ask me, I'll tell you I have none whatsoever. It's a really weird conundrum. You make your own mind up, and that's why I wrote it as it was real at the time, so as you could make your own decisions and you could decide what was right or wrong, because it's not for me to tell you otherwise. So, let's continue with Checkmate. The night was very windy. I had to lie in though and was surprised because I'd slept until gone 10 AM, but I could still hear that whistling noise. Perhaps the property had a hole somewhere. I checked everything. It was definitely outside. There was no damp, no chimney, so we had a gas fire, and there was no holes in any of the walls or window frames. They were single pane windows though. Perhaps one had warped. I checked everything, making a mental note to get some locks for the windows, as I knew from experience a butter knife could get those things open easily. The front door had a Chubb and Yale lock, so I was happy with that, yet I still had to add a bolt out of habit. The back door led into a courtroom, and then had the rear door behind that, so that was plenty secure. I went through that door, checking the locks, and stood outside in the large area in the garden, making a note to repair a piece of fencing. Strange, no wind at all. Another gorgeous day. I went to the chippy and returned home just as a van pulled up behind me. Okay, mental note for anyone not in the UK, not sure what a chippy is. It's the chip shop. Sausage, chips and gravy usually. Battered sausage with chips, gotta be done, it's beautiful. Anyway, continuing with Checkmate. Courtney got out and ran up the drive. Say nothing to Craig, I've sorted it, she said quietly. I presume she'd paid him 30 quid that he wasn't even owed, but hey, my stuff was here and I wasn't going to kick off in front of the kids. I unpacked and sent him on his way without a brew. Courtney told me that night she'd spoke to Maureen, his wife. She'd spent the money on a night out. She couldn't tell Craig because he'd beat her. Courtney felt sorry for her and gave her some jewellery I'd bought her as a payment for Craig. I was not amused, but there was nothing I could do about it. And I didn't need the aggravation. The problem started almost immediately. First, Courtney felt cold for no reason, so cold that she'd shake. I felt nothing. She wasn't sneezy or anything, she'd be totally fine a half hour later. We put it down to the stress of moving. I was used to it, and she wasn't. We got the kids into school and doctors and got to settling in, away from Macclesfield, where everything would be relaxed and easy, with no memories. I was watching TV with Courtney when I heard a bang in the kitchen. Stay, I said, pointing, as I ran towards the noise. It was stone cold in there, but nothing had moved, and it was completely empty. I checked the door and looked out the window. Nothing apart from the pool of water in the corner of the room that had started to build up. We got a leak, I told Courtney. She mopped it up whilst I checked the nearest radiator, which was a good several feet away and bone dry. I checked the pipes behind the washing machine and sink, but again nothing. We called the council the following day and they came out to check for a leak and found none. This would repeat itself several times over the next 3 months. Sometimes the water would be over half covering the kitchen floor, and yet bone dry the next morning. In the end I pulled the lino floor up to see if there was some kind of piping beneath the flooring. I could find no causes and nor could the council. The floor was solid and bone dry. There was not even water damage left to any of the wooden units where the water had touched several times. I told Courtney it wasn't right and I started to feel edgy. Courtney told me she'd had a couple of bad dreams and felt watched within the property. I'd come off what years later I'd find out was a breakdown and could be related. However, this time it felt totally unconnected. I was 15, trying to provide for a family on the money social services were providing for Courtney to care for me, which was less than £40 a week, plus Courtney's benefits, and trying to find a job. I'd handed CVs out of Bury, and eventually a sandwich shop took me on, cash in hand. A lady had just taken over from the previous people who had moved on to a more profitable area. I was there 4 days, mainly preparing sandwiches and cleaning the store when she asked me to serve a customer. I can't, I replied, as I was stood at the bottom of the stairs keeping an eye on the shop floor. Why not? She shouted down. I can't use the till, I replied. Why not? She challenged. Because you haven't shown me, I replied, looking apologetically at the customer. And that was the end of that job. Back at Courtney's, money was tight. We couldn't afford cigarettes, and Fawn's shoes were the wrong colour for dance lessons. We couldn't afford new ones, it was eating me up. Wenzel had a job, Clive had a job, why can't I have a job? Who will hire a 15-year-old? I thought of the fruit and veg shop and felt very sad. I went to the library and spoke to everyone I could until I discovered the army. I told Courtney I was signing up, and that they'd take me as soon as I was 16. I'd send her money for the kids. She'd never see me, but I'd be helping her family, and she'd not have to live like this. I just got home and Fawn was crying in her mum's arms. What's up? I asked as Fawn pushed past me and ran upstairs. Huh? I asked Courtney, who went on to explain Fawn was getting bullied at school for not having the right colour shoes, so she wasn't allowed to do dance lessons. Hers were brown, and they had to be black. I was gutted for Fawn and felt really bad because in my mind it was my responsibility to take care of her. I could only think of one thing to do under the circumstances. Get me her shoes, I said. I'd had some spray paint left over from where I'd redone my bike. I spent hours that night going over and over her shoes so as they were perfectly black. At the time I was quite impressed. Unfortunately, Fawn was doing dance lessons when some paint came off her shoes and showed the true colour underneath. She got bullied for having shoes which had been painted black. I couldn't win. I felt totally incompetent. We'd had some money through from the council which would allow us to decorate. I was decorating the living room when Courtney returned home with a pit bull terrier. "What the fuck?" I asked. "I thought you liked dogs," she replied. "You said we could have one when we moved," she added. I failed to respond that what I'd actually said was, "When the place is all set up and we have enough money, then you can have the rough collie you want." So instead I replied with, "We can barely feed ourselves, take it back." "He was free, I can't, he was being given away. I couldn't just leave him," she added. We had an argument about how he could be vicious, how she knew nothing about his history, and how she's going to pay for his upkeep, which somehow turned into, "Who's going to look after us while you're in the army?" I told her she did alright before I turned up, and she'd do alright after. It was around then I knew things were never going to work out. The newspaper reporter turned up. She was a cute girl with red hair who kept flirting with me in front of Courtney. I tried not to let on I'd noticed and answered the questions. I gave her a picture of Wenzel after I'd cut Rachel and the kids out of it. This wasn't their fault, and there was no need to include them. I was told when the article was complete I'd get a copy of it to check before it went to press. Then I could make alterations if it needed any. I received the article very shortly after, and I had no issues with it. I signed it and Courtney signed it. We got paid £500 and I blew it on kids' clothes and shopping inside 2 days, and I was chuffed. I'd got back at Wenzel and I'd helped the family out. Fuck him. It was finally over. I had my own personal closure. I could join the army, find a bird and settle down. Who was I kidding? It had only just begun. Okay, chapter 17, and this is definitely the last chapter for today because, well, firstly, because I've just replayed a message that I sent to one of my American friends, and it didn't make much sense to me, so God knows what sense it's going to make to her, bless her. Truth be told, this chapter is a little bit out there. I know many people that wouldn't appreciate it, but it's nonetheless a true story. So, I started out saying to my missus, if I write the book, I will only ever write the truth. I've lied in the past, never about the book. I lied growing up when I said that my mother attacked my father. I lied in the past when I said that my mother was abusive to my father. I lied to protect my father because that's what I was trained to do. I lied to protect myself as a kid. So as one of my other siblings took the abuse and I didn't. Or so as I took the abuse and they didn't. So I learnt to lie pretty damn well. But it was abuse and it was about survival. And I am not responsible as an adult for the things that happened to me as a child. Or for the ways I acted as a fucking child to survive. And so I hold no guilt there. That doesn't change the fact that these things happened. Just the same way that I look back on this chapter 17 of Checkmate and I go, you know what, that's totally ridiculous and totally crazy and totally insane, and it was obviously something else. And I can reread it and look back and go, my God, Courtney was such a twat. She was an adult taking advantage of a child. Fuck me, how ridiculous. And she did several times, regardless. At the time I was not complaining, but my missus would look at this now, today, and go, Jesus Christ, she was a nonce. Just because she was female shouldn't make any difference. Now, when my missus talks to me about these things, I say, so what? I was 15, I was horny, I didn't care. And I didn't, because I didn't see it. But when I look back at it as an adult, and I reread it, how would I feel if a 39, she was 39, if a 39-year-old male was into my 15-year-old daughter? How long do you think that guy would be breathing for? That's what that then becomes. Not fucking long would be my guess. So no, it wasn't right. But I was there and that's how it went down. So let's Let's continue with chapter 17. It was early evening and Courtney had brought home another dog, this time a golden Labrador. He was cute, but still we couldn't afford him. We had another argument. He was £50 and that's a bargain. She'd offered it as an explanation. He wasn't house trained. That's not the point. We need electric, food. What do we have left until Friday? £16, but we'll be okay, she said. She had no clue about forward thinking. It was only Tuesday. We sat in silence and waited for the kids' bedtime to arrive. The curtain blew out into the room and it became very cold. I looked at Courtney as the curtain moved along its rail and Fawn let out a "Mom!" as she pointed towards the window and turned white. "Time for bed, guys. School tomorrow," I said, opening the curtain all the way. The windows were closed. There was no draft. And even if there had been, it couldn't have moved those curtains in that way. "What was that?" Fawn asked on the way up the stairs. "Just the wind," I replied. Fawn ran down the stairs 10 minutes later, as Courtney and I were trying to figure out how the curtains had moved. "There's smoke in my room." I flew up the stairs. There was no smoke, but I could smell cigars clearly, and only in her room. I checked all the windows, and again they were closed. I called Fawn and Courtney upstairs and explained how our neighbour may be smoking a pipe or a cigar, and it could be that she's smelling. I stayed with her until she fell asleep. Downstairs, Courtney said she'd felt as though someone was in Fawn's room. "Brew?" I asked, changing the subject and heading to the kitchen. The floor was piss. The floor was piss wet through. "I've had enough of this," I told Courtney. "Something's here," she said. "Well, something can fuck off," I told her. I was shaken, but otherwise okay. We spoke about getting the housing association back to check everything, and went to bed around 11. After 10 minutes I fell asleep. Upon waking, I found I couldn't move. It was dark out and I was stuck to the bed. I felt like something was smothering me. I tried to fight, but I couldn't move. After several seconds, which felt like an eternity, I broke free. I was gasping for breath and sweating heavily. Courtney was awake, staring at me. "You have fits?" she asked. "No," I replied, explaining. "I could see you moving, struggling, but I didn't want to touch you in case it scared you," she said. We sat up all night. In all honesty, I was too scared to sleep. My mum's compensation money had come through, and both Courtney and I decided we weren't staying there and put in a bid for an exchange. I'd got £2,556 for my mother's death. Oh, actually, what I didn't write in there is also it was 56p on top of that. They worked it out in a really strange way. It was either that I'd known her the least amount of time, and so I'd got the least amount from the other siblings would have theoretically had chance to know her longer, or that I'd got the most because I'd known her longer, and therefore had more of a loss. It was a strange system, and one I found totally ridiculous. My mother was dead. No amount of money was going to change that, and even though I was flat broke, young and often naive, I knew I didn't want anything to do with that money. That money symbolised my mother, and I couldn't keep her, and so I didn't want the money that signified her death. I bought a 022 Webley Vulcan with a hurricane spring just in case it was someone messing with us and the property, and not what Courtney and I were presuming was a spook. Courtney got a new jacket, and I got a 5-disc multiplayer CD player because I remembered my granddad loving the 3-disc one he'd got years earlier. I got the food in, and the rest was for when we moved. I made a mistake here. I wish I'd never done so, but I did. I took Courtney out to a pub, and we had a couple of games of pool, and we let Fawn babysit. We told our neighbour Andy that Fawn was babysitting as she was 13. She had our phone number and his if there was any problems. He said he'd keep an eye out for us, and we had no reason to doubt him. Fawn didn't call at all when we were out, and when we returned everyone was in bed apart from Fawn, who was sat cross-legged in the living room. The TV was off, and she'd been crying. "Are you alright? What's up?" I asked. "Water, in kitchen. I didn't do it. I swear. Curtains. Lights. I sent them to bed," she said, panicking. I looked around the room frantically. After calming her down, she told me the curtains had blown out on her and scared the kids, who she sent to bed. Then she'd found water in the kitchen and thought we'd blame her for it, and so she tried cleaning it up when the lights went on and off. She didn't call because she thought she'd be in trouble. So she sat watching TV, trying to forget about the water, when the TV turned itself off. She'd been sat there alone since, just waiting for us to come back. I promised her I'd never leave her alone again, and then I did something which to this day I don't know if was right or wrong to do. I told her the truth. I explained we had no idea what it was either, and that we were sorry everyone was going through this, but thought it was better to keep it from them than to tell them the truth. That when I was 10, I just wanted answers from everyone, and so as she was 13, we thought it right to tell her rather than make up stories. We told her when we moved she could choose her own room. She took it well, and the following day I went to see Andy. After listening to my story intently and giving me several funny looks, I came to the conclusion that Andy simply thought I was mad. However, he did say, "There's a church over the back there, go and ask them." We spoke to several people at the local library about the church and our property to see if anything had ever been recorded. They listened and came up with several stories, but nothing more and nothing that was concrete. It was feasible the churchyard had moved over time downhill and somehow that it was now beneath our garden, and through putting fencing in we'd disturbed something. That was one of the wilder theories. If it was true, we were still left with the same two questions. What was happening, and how do we stop it? We also discovered our next door neighbour's brother killed himself a couple of years back. Could that be related? Wouldn't any of these disturbances be in his property and not ours? A few days later, and after another dream where there was a woman trying to protect my child, which was in a cot in front of my window, as a man was walking towards me, and I woke up just as he reached me. I was sweating buckets, but so angry. I was so angry because I felt the person in the dream had been killed, and the baby had at least been hurt. I was so upset. Had this happened here? Was this something to do with Mum? Was I losing my mind because of Mum's death, and this in some way was about protecting her and not being able to protect her? I was overthinking everything. I kept telling Courtney over and over if I was wrong I wasn't well, but if I was right there would be some kind of sign knocking around somewhere which would confirm what happened. Why hadn't Andy said anything if someone had been here? Why hadn't Andy said it if someone had been killed here? We decided to go over every single part of the house to find out about the leak and the wind, whether it was likely or not, and eventually we got to check in the loft. I'd had to stand on the balcony banister and then onto a chair back as we had no ladders. I was halfway through pulling myself up when I heard several sharp thuds coming straight towards me. I dropped down and pushed Courtney backwards into the bedroom and shouted for Aaron to step back at the same time as I thought whoever it was would jump down. There was no further sound, but Courtney said she heard it, whilst Darren just looked concerned. I took it all in whilst not taking my eyes off the open ceiling hatch. I pointed to the bedroom door and Courtney walked around the chair to grab my rifle and torch. I took the torch and she held the rifle. I was petrified but looked around and there was absolutely nothing there apart from 2 bin bags besides a water tank. There was no places for anyone to hide and no rats or creatures that I could see. I grabbed the bin bags and threw them down and made a quick exit. I was convinced more than ever I was either losing my mind or there was something paranormal going on. We waited until the kids were in bed before opening the bags. They were full of baby clothes. Happy Mother's Day 2023, 19th of March. I'm Tracie Daily. Leave me a review somewhere. Spotify, Apple, here, there and everywhere, I don't care. Leave a review somewhere, share it with your friends, your enemies, people you like, people you don't, share it everywhere. If you like what you listen to, share it. If you don't like what you listen to, share it twice. Take care of yourselves and each other. Till next time.